talking about if you should code, you should write.
Thanks a lot. So my name is BrianK.Jones. I'm BK.Jones on Twitter. I'm Jonesy on Freenode. I am the Chief Technology Officer at AWeber Communications. And I've been a PSF member since 2011. This year actually marks the first of a 3-year sponsorship. AWeber sponsors PyCon because we support Python, because we use it in non-trivial ways throughout our organization. So your lanyards are going to say AWeber on them until we get through with Montreal in 2015. I should also say that we're always hiring engineers all the time. See me later about that if you like. So why this talk? So I've had an opportunity. I have a pretty extensive background in writing and in publishing for somebody whose primary career is in technology. Because I've worked in a lot of roles where I've had to recruit writers, what I've learned is that it's really hard to recruit writers. I was the editor-in-chief of PHP Architect magazine from about issue number 2 until it got to newsstands and we were planning PHP cruises and things like that. I kind of burned out on that, and then a couple of years later, I wanted to be a consumer of a magazine about Python. I'd like to learn that way, and there wasn't one, so I did it. So there. And that, of course, meant I had to be the editor-in-chief of that project to get legs under it, and also had to recruit authors to write for the magazine, which was incredibly challenging. So that's part of it. I don't think it should be that challenging. The other reason is that I think it's really important to spread knowledge and share ideas and to open dialogues. It's not just that it's important, it's actually a core component of what I would call a really successful Python community. And I think that we need to provide for the care and feeding of that open dialogue if we're going to sustain that success going forward. So if I'm going to tell you that you should write, then I probably should address maybe why I think you might not be writing. I've heard a lot of different kinds of objections to writing, but I don't often hear objections about the validity of a writing assignment idea. What I often hear objections to are the notion that this person that I'm talking to should ever be assigned a writing project ever at all. And they're two very different things. Perhaps 90% of the objections I've heard fall into 2 high-level objection classes, which I'd like to quickly describe. So here's 2 common objections that fall into what I'm calling the same bucket. These fall under the I don't think I have anything interesting to say category, and that makes me sad when people think that they don't have anything interesting to say. So for the first objection here, that it's all been written before, I'd like to say that freshness counts a lot. And I think that that's a valid assertion to make, and I think it's proven by the fact that I know for sure, because I've asked, that a lot of people, when they search Google for content that will help them solve a technical problem, they have been bitten by stale content that leads them down a path to sadness. And what they do in response to that is they go to Google and they say, okay, well, just show me the results that have been dated in the last year. Has anyone done that in this room? Right. So freshness counts. If it's been written before, that is more likely to guarantee than preclude that it will be written again. Technologies change. Best practices change. Things that are written will be written again. It's almost like code. For the second objection, I'd like to say that any technology is probably worth writing about. It's not that the technology or something you're doing with it has to be cool. It's that technology happens to be cool. And even if you don't think it's cool, somebody else thinks it's cool. I have proof of this from my own life. I was a contributing editor for Linux.com, and I was writing a weekly column called Sysadmin to Sysadmin, where I wrote about sysadmin-y things. And one of the things I wrote was a 2,000-word article on xargs. Who thinks xargs is cool? You have problems. Seek help. Xargs is not particularly cool. It's not particularly advanced, but I got a lot of thank yous for having written that because there were a whole bunch of people who just hadn't gotten there yet, and they were really thankful to get that content. All right, nobody's going to raise their hands at the end of this one. So I also wrote, I co-authored Linux Server Hacks Volume 2 in 2005. And I wrote something like a 3,000 plus word hack. And all it did was explain, I think all it did was explain the fudge keyword of the ntp.conf file. That's pretty much, I think, all it did, if I remember right. Now, NTP isn't cool, but no, I didn't stop there. I went into the configuration file, which is even less cool than the thing it configures. And I didn't even stop there, because that was not uncool enough. I just picked on a specific keyword in the most uncool configuration file for what is perhaps the most uncool daemon ever to run in Linux. I got a lot of thank yous for that. People really wanted that content. They wanted to know. They had been seeking this kind of explanation for the fudge keyword for a long time, apparently. It doesn't have to be cool. The fact that you're writing is cool. You bring something cool to it when you write about it. So sometimes these kinds of objections are about a weird kind of performance anxiety. They don't want to pose as an authority and then be kind of called out. And first of all, I should say that you should be willing to be the happy idiot. You should put yourself out there. And if you're called out, then you learn and you revise your work and you move on. But you don't have to write from a position of authority either. You should dare to dream in your writing, and you should write about the limitations that are keeping you from attaining those dreams right now. And you should start dialogues about addressing those limitations. You can point out really cool things that you found and used that has nothing to do with being an authority. You can link to GitHub blobs that show a really interesting way to do, testing patterns or something like that. And you can call out in your blog post like, is this cool or is this crazy? Should I be doing this? Is this a best practice? What's going on here? Ask questions in your writing. Start dialogues. You don't have to be an authority to write. Also, your writing, I should say, does not need to be book length. I've worked on 2 books, but really my favorite kind of writing is short form. And I think if you're somebody who isn't writing right now, to think that you're going to go from that to just all of a sudden writing a book is kind of... Books require a special kind of masochist who will put themselves through that process. So don't think that you have to go to that extreme in order to get started. I also want to say that if you're not doing anything cool, part of that is on you as an engineer. If you're not doing anything cool, you should use writing as a first step to helping you get to work on something cool. Write about the kinds of problems that you'd like to be solving. Chances are somebody is maybe working on that already and could use some help, or they can point you at a project, or they might encourage you to start one and give you input about what they'd like to see in this project. So this is the second class of objection. I'm a terrible writer, and I don't know where to start, and these actually fall under a category called I don't understand the writing or editorial process. This is really pretty easily addressed, and so I'd actually like to just do it now. You need to identify outlets, right? The easiest and most obvious one is a blog that you own yourself. And then people can even subscribe via RSS to the feed of your blog if they have a usable, non-deprecated client. Magazines are awesome. I really like magazines because I like to read them. And when I worked on them, I really liked working on them. And I liked working with the authors on those magazines. Magazines are great, and there are lots of non-code magazines that have columns and sections in them about code. So one would be maybe Raspberry Pi, right? I just learned this morning that Raspberry Pi actually has a magazine. Chances are they're looking for people to produce content for that magazine. And chances are you don't have to even be writing from a position of authority, because I think it would be awesome actually if somebody just wrote an article that said, here's my experience getting started doing something cool with Raspberry Pi, having never touched this link, or if it's not right on the home page, you can go to the About, and there is probably a Write For Us link on that page. And you can submit a prototype, or you can send a link to the editor saying, this is a sample of my writing. I would love it if there were things that you wanted to write about. Let me know what kinds of things you like content on, and I'd be happy to write for you. You can also just send content to editors, and you could just find them on Twitter and say, I'd like to send you something. They'll probably be okay with that. It turns out that editors are constantly scouring, looking for people to produce content. So if you go to them, then it makes their job easier, and they'll take a shot. Sorry. The other thing that you can do if you don't really want to like go scouring and looking for places to submit content is just blog, and you'll find that the editor sometimes will find you. I should also say that there's a mailing list for Python authors, and I don't remember the URL, but you should go and Google the Python mailing list, and there is a place where you can sign up for a mailing list where publishers put out calls for authors about Python. Editors, sometimes when I say that I write, they assume people look at me strange. They turn their head sideways and look at me like I went to a school to learn magical incantations that are only known by the editors and the authors that have been indoctrinated into some spooky realm. It's really not like that at all. They expect you to kind of know the content. You know, they expect you to know that to confidently express an idea, whether it's from a position of authority or not is irrelevant. It's just that you need to confidently express an idea. They don't expect a whole lot else, even to the extent that if English is not your first language, they'll work it out if the idea is generally clear. If you have all the pieces in there and your English is actually not bad, but organizationally you're a mess, that's not a big deal. Submit it. Just put it out there. The editor will give you feedback and you will revise it and things will be fine. The job of an editor is to make you look like a rock star because that makes their publication look good. On larger projects, they actually serve a project management service. They take care of the planning, they set the scope, they help you get your head around what you're doing, and they take care of everything that would otherwise drag you away from actually creating content. That is your job. So you don't have to know very much. So I told you about those two classes of objections so that I could tell you this. It turns out that it seems that people in any field, not just technology, are really resistant to the idea of adding additional titles or designations to themselves like writer or author. One of the most common objections I've gotten to in the past to writing is just simply, I'm not a writer. To which I say, yeah, you're not a writer because, you know, like writing is iterative and you have to like be okay with kind of picking on your own work and going back and revising it and I don't know, no, wait a minute, that's exactly like when you write code. So, well, but writers have to throw away content. Like we just like make drafts. Like I think over the course of 2012, I made like 14 drafts and I published like, you know, maybe 3 or 4 things over the course of 2012. So yeah, clearly, oh no, wait a minute. Actually, no, coders do that all the time too. Well, writing really well takes a lot of practice and a lot of patience, and the best way to do it is to just actually do it and find something that you want to write about and actually just, you know, do it. And oh, wait a minute, that sounds quite like what we tell coders who are looking for a way to improve their coding skills, right? Writers use tools that make writing easier. Sometimes it seems like no two writers have the same setup. And so you get these religious wars about how, you know, writers set up their workflow and everything, and it's all this spooky stuff. And no, actually, that sounds a lot like Emacs and VI. So the point is actually that you are already a writer. Everyone in this room, by virtue of the fact that you're writing code, you are actually writers. You find inspiration, you iterate on your ideas, you test them out, mostly by showing them to other people. You refine your thinking on the matter, you revise, you move things forward through sheer expression using words in some medium. That is called writing. It's just that the tools that you use aren't configured to write prose optimally all the time. So now that I've told you all the reasons why you probably don't write, and now that you know that everyone in this room actually is already a writer, you should feel pretty empowered, but now why should you write exactly? And to that I would say, you know, coders who care about moving themselves forward in their craft typically also care about the care and feeding of that craft because they're invested in it. They read a lot to further themselves, and a lot of that stuff is really useful. It teaches you something new, it validates assumptions that you had, it pokes holes in ideas that you had, it points you at new tools and new resources that you can learn even more from. Different people get different things from a single piece of content, and it causes a convergence of ideas that inevitably leads to the next big explosion, more chaos, a further converging, and this is how we build maturity and greater understanding, and this is how we push things forward as a community. From a completely selfish standpoint, given the proper economic climate, you can make a living from writing, but I will forewarn you that living conditions in this economic climate might be manifested in the physical world by a VW bus. Also, from a completely selfish standpoint, you will almost certainly further your own knowledge by getting feedback about the content that you've produced, which is maybe the best non-altruistic form of payment. But the big payoff, I think, is that it's really gratifying to feel like you're helping to support the medium that has helped you progress in your career, and you're supporting the community of developers that are coming up behind you. Those developers will look up to you because you help them, and they'll come see you talk at meetups. They'll follow your blog. They'll seek you out at PyCon if you give talks, because usually writing, by the way, usually ends up leading to giving talks. And when they come to you for advice on how to move forward or get ahead with something, then you should be sure to do your best to share what you know, and also mention that if you code, you should write. Thank you. I was so nervous that went really fast, and I have more time for questions than I thought I would. Please ask them. Hey, Alex.
Hi. Great talk, thank you. And rather than a question, I have an observation. I would point out that the amount of money you make directly by writing may often look very disappointing, but how do you guys think I snagged a job at Google? that paid pretty well, indirectly. They were using my books as standard material. So when they got in touch with me, they already knew who I were, and I didn't have to prove decent competence on the subject, Python in particular. Think of it as advertising you get modestly paid for, but you're advertising your skills when you write good technical stuff.
Absolutely.
That can't hurt.
Yep. Yeah, you're creating an identity for yourself that people can use to seek you out. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alex.
Other than being Googled or something like that, do you have any ideas how to get a blog that you write, or if you post to Google Plus or something like that, actually paid attention to?
I can tell you that my blog in 2004 was not very well paid attention to, or so I thought. And I wrote to Robin Miller, who was the editor of Linux.com at the time, and I sent him a link to my blog, and I said, I think that this would be useful, and you don't have any system administrator content on your site. And he said, would you be willing to do a weekly? He went and reviewed my blog, so I got it paid attention to by asking somebody to go look at it. And another way, it's actually easier now. There's a lot more aggregation and syndication going on of blogs. So for Python, there's Planet Python, there's Planet MySQL. The Planet sites in general are sites that aggregate a whole bunch of RSS feeds into one place. And then a lot of the communities actually just subscribe to that and maybe one or two other personal blogs, instead of actually trying to go seek out all the blogs that they should subscribe to. So getting your blog paid attention to is much easier now. It's really just a matter of you paying attention to that. And it's also nice with Twitter now that you can post a blog, post to Twitter, have it retweeted. The people who are actually authorities on that topic will go and they'll click on that. And it's often surprising the people that reply to you on there.
Cool, great talk, thank you.
Thank you.
I could probably ask Google this question, but I have you. So do you have any blog sites that are a good place to start for code-type blogs that kind of let you hit the ground running?
I'm sorry, code blogs that what?
Like a website that's good for code blogging, like code blogging kind of thing.
A site that will tell you kind of how to blog about code?
Just like with the tools already built in that kind of help you just do it.
No, there's just WordPress. I don't know of any blogs that will tell you how to blog about code. I think it's just sort of like, that's kind of a personal thing. You develop your own voice, and sometimes you base it on the voices around you, and then you eventually kind of filter it down into something that's your own. But I have never read an article about how to blog about technology. I think it would probably be interesting. You should blog about that. Blog about your personal journey in learning to blog about code. That would be awesome.
So you and I have actually an interesting link. My first book was published by PHP Architect.
Nice.
And I remember when I got the advance, I think it was like $900 or something like that. And I was really disappointed. And so for my second book, which I released in December, I took a self-publishing route. And I have 9,200 really good reasons why that worked out well for me. But my question for you is whether or not you think self-publishing or using things like LeanPub and other things are going to be beneficial and useful for authors and content consumers, readers, or whether or not you would still stick with the traditional model of seeking out a publisher. And so
that's based on your personal goal. I think that if people write for very different reasons. They might be writing specifically to get their name on the cover of a book so that they can send a copy of that book to some hiring manager that they want the attention of. And in that case, you might be better off going with some other route. If you are looking for fortune and fame on the speaker circuit, then you might want to be on the bookshelves in Barnes & Noble. If you really just want to help out the community, you'll just open up the content and you won't care. So there's two opposite ends of the spectrum, and I think all of them are really valid. And by the way, just because you want to give your content away for free does not preclude you from being published by a major publisher either. Because even so, I worked on the third edition of the Python cookbook, which Alex wrote the first two editions of, and that content is actually going to be distributed back out to the active state Python cookbook, so that content actually mostly will be out there. And they did that, remember, with the Subversion book? Like, that's freely available online. They do that a lot. Other publishers do that too. So there's a lot of options. There's a whole 3D matrix of options that you can do. You can do published that's free, or published that's not free, or self-published that's free or not free. There's a lot of choices out there and options. So it depends on their goal.
Hi, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say, so I'm actually a tech writer at Google. So I write docs for developers.google.com. And I want to emphasize that, don't underestimate your writing skills. It is really, really important to have writers that have technical backgrounds. And that's what we look for, honestly. And if you like to code and if you like to write, that's awesome. You should totally pursue that. And there is a market out there for people like you, honestly. So.
Yeah, I think it's a little one-sided to see people walking around with shirts that say Code Poet on them, and then they never really write any prose. That's just unfair.
Since the question was raised about tech blogging, or how to start tech blogging, I wasn't really sure if it's more of a question about tools, but my name is Justin. I'm a member of the Pelican dev team. It's a static site generator. It's a great it's a great tool to use to write a tech blog. It supports, well, it's good to know that was the question.
Yeah, I've seen blogs actually that are using Pelican.
Yeah, it supports automatic syntax highlighting in Python and a number of other languages. Another good one that a colleague of mine wrote, that's more of it's a hosted solution, not something you would download and generate yourself. It's called Snipped. It's targeted more at specifically towards code bloggers. So either of those tools might be handy.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. I think it's all the questions.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.